Hi, everyone. We're ready to go.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, it's 2:34 p.m. and I'm going to call the Economic Prosperity Committee meeting for the City of Colwood to order. And first of all, I'd like to acknowledge that we are meeting on the shared traditional lands of the Coast Salish people. So I'm not looking up to God here, but I've got this brand new 48-inch screen here, and it's kind of scary seeing everyone. You're like in my living room here. So it's kind of neat. So I am looking up there because the screen is so big. Anyways, at this moment, I'd like to, I think everyone's had a chance to look at the agenda. If I can just get a motion for approval of the agenda for the Economic Prosperity Committee for 14 September.
So moved.
Okay, thank you very much. And call the question, anyone oppose the agenda? And it looks like no one does, so we'll move on. So item 3, adoption of the minutes. Everyone's had a chance, hopefully, to look over the minutes from the June 8th, 2020 Economic Prosperity Committee meeting. Are there any errors or omissions? Again, I'll ask for a motion to approve the past minutes. Councillor Logan, thank you very much. And call the question, anyone opposed? And no opposes. Okay, no one's in opposition. At this point in time, public participation. I just want to remind the public at any time that members of the public will be provided an opportunity at each time or at each item to present concerns or ask questions to the committee. And at this point in time, as of noon hour today, I don't believe there was no correspondence that was received. I just want to confirm that with staff that we don't have any correspondence.
Yes.
Okay. And has anyone, does anyone want to speak to, do you know offhand, Marcy?
No, there is nobody registered to speak. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I'll move on to item 5, delegations. There is no delegations. Item 6, there's no old business, and we'll go straight to new business, item 7. And at this point in time, I'll ask Ian Borhill, our Director of Long Range Planning and Sustainability, to do a presentation on the Prosperity Roundtable meeting themes. Ian?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just going to share my screen here. So as the committee may remember, Council endorsed a recommendation to create a new set of meetings flowing from a desire in the strategic plan to create a standing opportunity for Council and the corporation to meet with members of the development community. The strategy that was developed was one that was broader in scope, in that the meetings would target both the business community as well as the development sector. So we have a series of dates that were set through that process. And now the opportunity is for the committee to give feedback on some ideas as for themes for these meetings. So the format that council approved was one that was very similar to the Recovery Roundtable series that we thought was successful, in that there was a series of questions posed to participants. But before that, there was also the opportunity for participants to have an open discussion and give whatever feedback or ask questions they felt fit at the meeting. So this would be targeting members of both our business and development communities. And the idea is that it would be a lunchtime meeting. So after COVID, the hope is that we're creating an informal opportunity for members of our business and development communities to meet with members of the Economic Prosperity Committee, informally sitting as participants. So the first theme, and please, by all means, Mr. Chair, if there's any questions, that I'm happy to answer in situ or at the end. We thought that for the first meeting that's scheduled this month, that we would do a check-in on COVID-19 recovery. We're well into council's recovery plan, and there's quite a few strategies and tactics that we'd like to hear feedback on, more so than we're already doing through our outreach. Secondly, we're proposing for our January 12th Prosperity Roundtable meeting that we focus on the upcoming year's development sector and the outlook for 2021, along with providing an opportunity for dialogue with our development sector. If we were going to be going by the quarterly schedule that was requested by council, we would be holding this meeting on December 29th, but we felt that it was appropriate to bump that given the holiday closure that's expected. So this is scheduled for January 12th. Next, in March 30th, 2021, we're proposing that this meeting focus on what the city can do to entice businesses to move to Colwood and to keep our existing businesses. So the theme here would tie in nicely with the work that we're charged to do with respect to updating the economic development strategy. So in all of these things, we're hoping that the meeting results help us with work that's ongoing and expected for 2021. So June 29th, this is a theme that's called Ideas Wanted, Regulatory and Development Process Innovation. And this ties into work that's scheduled to happen towards the end of this year and next with respect to streamlining development and building process and regulation. So this is probably a meeting that quite a few members of our business and development community would be interested in providing input on. And lastly, this would be the first meeting the last meeting in 2021, September 28th, that would be scheduled as a part of the current program. This, once again, is something that ties into work that's planned for next year with respect to our Colwood Economic Development Strategy. And we're hoping to ask the business communities how we can, from their perspective, foster sustainable growth. So the term sustainable is invoked here to tie into sustainability from a business and financial standpoint, but also an environmental one and from a broader perspective. So that concludes my presentation, and happy to get feedback on these themes now. And certainly if there's other themes that the committee is interested in recommending council put forward, happy to provide feedback on that as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ian. Any questions for Ian? Don't see anybody. Yeah, I if no one, oh, yes, sorry. Councillor Day.
Thank you. For your sessions, I think it might be and maybe this is already in your plan, but it might be helpful for participants to know in advance some ideas about what you're actually looking for at each of these meetings. So, for example, the next one that's coming up on our COVID recovery and how we're doing, I think, I don't, maybe you already have it planned, but I think there needs to be a bit of meat on the bones so that there's kind of a conversation starter to that, because I think businesses are really doing their best and they have a lot coming at them. And that's what we've heard the last time that we were doing it when COVID first hit. You know, there was a lot of clamor and wanting to tell us about, you know, what the issues were, which is great. And now that we're kind of rolling with what, you know, our health experts tell us, everybody's kind of figured out their best practices, but there might not be as much incentive to talk about, you know, where are the parts where it's not quite working or it's not consistently working. So it might be helpful to get that information out. Is that part of your plan?
Through the chair, yes, thank you, Councillor Day. The plan is to have the guiding questions, and we're thinking a maximum of 2 to 3 in the second round of the each meeting be provided in advance. So there would be some opportunity for the participants to consider what they'd like to bring to the roundtable. And we would also be taking the feedback and providing it to the public through a process very much akin to our recovery roundtable program.
Great. And just to follow up, same kind of theme really, but when you get to the sustainability next year in September, I think that that word is used a lot and not well understood. You know, people have perceptions that it's about X when it's, you know, maybe you're talking about Y, and, you know, it's just a word that's used a lot. So I think it's really important to do some work in advance of those types of meetings to define what we're talking about, to kind of whet people's appetites to discuss the subject when they feel informed about what we're looking for and exactly what we're talking about.
Okay. Councillor Parkinson.
Thank you, Councillor Kobayashi. I like this. I think the topics are applicable and useful. My concern is they're probably very useful to us as council, and as we're trying to do our job, I'm not as convinced they're useful and applicable to the business community. So I just would hope that we're getting, at least after each of these sessions, some sense of the participation from the business community, what their ideas and thoughts were, as opposed to what we think they should be, and just monitoring it that way. You know, this is all good stuff. I guess even if the business community doesn't show up, there will be good information for us come out of it, but it'd be so much stronger if it's very relevant to the business community, which we'll only be able to assess by their participation. So I guess I would be looking for some feedback as we go along on that specific aspect.
Thank you very much, Councillor Parkinson. Councillor Jensen.
I was just going to move the recommendation, which I believe is just an option to endorse proposal, Your Eminence.
Okay, thank you very much. So we got a mover. So just I have a couple questions for you before I call the question. First of all, when are you going to discuss like the success of the Economic Prosperity Committee or the Economic Recovery Plan, the measures? Is that going to be discussed? Is that council or committee of the whole, or are we looking at different metrics. I know it's very difficult to measure how successful all these actions are going to be. But I guess the question that I have for you, Ian, is there going to be a point in time here where we're going to come up with some performance metrics to see if what we're doing is successful? And the second question I have right now is it's probably going to be part of one of your meetings, and that is, you know, it's nice to sort of say we want to attract these type of this is our attraction strategy, but do we know what we're targeting? Like, I'd like to understand, to have a listing of everything that you know, what brings the most revenue to the city. There's not a lot of light industrial land that we control. I think most of it, according in the OCP, is actually belongs to D&D. But you know, are there sort of target entities that we're going to be targeting? Because that discussion's we've never had that discussion. You know, we don't want a lot more car lots, you know, but so is there a specific vision that we have for what we want to target? So they're my questions, Ian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So on the first question, if the committee looks to council's near-term agenda, there are a series of touch points with the various council bodies as well as council itself that relate to the work of the COVID recovery project. So I just had a meeting this morning with some providers of statistics that we're hoping to in part use to develop very real metrics for economic success, both in the context of COVID recovery, but also long-term development of the community's prosperity. So we're doing that work right now. And as you may recall, that was part of the Build Back Better concept in the recovery plan. As for a date, I'd hope that sort of the beginning of Q4, we would have that and would be reporting to either Committee of the Whole or the Economic Prosperity meeting if the stars aligned on timing. And I'm just looking at the schedule. That would be October. Looks like the last Economic Prosperity Committee meeting is October 26th. So it'll be either of those two venues. With respect to any follow-up on that response, Mr. Chair?
No, that's good. Thank you.
So on your second question, I think what you've put forward is a really fantastic question. It was partly attempted to be addressed in the 2016 Economic Development Strategy, but I'd hazard a guess that the community has moved on to a large extent since then, and it is apropos to be asking that question. Business attraction, you know, what we're talking about here is potentially identifying which businesses we should be attracting. So we could weave that into the format of this roundtable, or take direction from council to look at that question in a more meaningful way as we move forward.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. I recognize Chief Administration Officer Robert Earl. Robert.
Thank you, Chair Kobayashi. Commenting further on Director Borhill's response, in the absence of the granular metrics that you're speaking about that we hope to achieve to some degree through our COVID economic recovery plan, the current strategic plan has prosperity targets of add 963 dwellings by 2023, and that's over and above the 2018 number. Add 6.5 acres of developed industrial land by 2023, and add 50,000 square feet of developed retail floor area by 2023. And so while those are kind of coarse type of metrics, those currently exist in Council Strategic Plan. Beyond that, there is developed metrics for household prosperity and established baseline data for household prosperity. And Council we'll hear later from our manager of communications about our plan to achieve some level of quantitative analysis there.
Thank you very much. No other comments? I don't see any other comments. I'll call the question. All those who oppose the recommendation. Seeing none, the recommendation is carried. Item 7.2, I'm going to ask, I think Jill Collinson, our senior planner, to discuss the prosperity tactic benchmarking municipal costs of development. Over to you, Jill.
Hi, Mr. Chair, it's Ian again.
Okay, Ian.
Hi, unfortunately, Jill sends her regrets. She was unfortunately sick today, so I will be presenting her report.
Okay, over to you, Ian.
So I will just share screen again here. Okay, so I think that this report is largely self-explanatory in terms of the data it puts forward, and I won't dwell on the numbers that are presented in this PowerPoint. So I'll go through this relatively quickly, but happy to take all the time as needed to respond to questions and zero in on areas that the committee would like to get more detail on. So as the committee is aware, the strategic plan put forward a tactic to take a look at our costs as they relate to development and fees and charges that flow from different types of applications and allowances to undertake development and construction in Colwood. Staff looked at a series of comparable municipalities in terms of there was a series of communities chosen for the benchmarking process. Langford, View Royal were chosen because of their adjacency to Colwood, and Oak Bay and Sydney were chosen as regional communities with a similar size population and other dynamics as Colwood. West Kelowna and White Rock were also chosen for comparables outside of the CRD that had similar development dynamics in terms of rapid growth in residential section. The application fees, and I'll just really quickly summarize, and I'll put it in the context of a spectrum, so where we sit. And it's difficult sometimes to try to compare fees and charges because each municipality takes a different approach as how they're doing what we're supposed to be doing, which is simply recovering our costs of prosecuting the processes and the application work. So as you can see here, with respect to development application fees, Colwood is comparable to other municipalities in the region and in BC. But if we could hazard a comparable on a spectrum, we would be on the higher end of the spectrum with respect to development application fees. But as you can see, there's quite a spread in terms of the different types of applications that one can make. So this slide is once again just talking about the different approaches that folks take and the implications for trying to compare them when it's a bit of an apples to oranges comparable. One thing to keep in mind is that Council in 2016 adopted a new set of fees and charges as part of an amendment to the land use procedures bylaw. And in that action, they also took the step of requiring a 5-year automatic review to our fees and charges that are within that bylaw. So the next one is scheduled for 2021. So I have to say this is a great time to be having this discussion ahead of the scheduled 5-year update next year. So staff for all ears is to get feedback ahead of that process that's going to happen next year. So now on to development cost charges. These are fees that are levied by bylaw as development takes place. Once again, each municipality takes a different approach as to how they're applied. So it's a bit difficult to compare. This table illustrates that in terms of the different ways in which the municipalities take it on. But to summarize, Colwood is once again comparable to other municipalities in the region and outside of the CRD and BC. But we would characterize us as sort of the lower end of the spectrum on the DCC charges. So once again, we should note that our development cost charge program is under review right now, with road charges being updated for council, and they being approved in principle at this point, and now at the consultation phase. So I will also just mention that in Jill's report, school site acquisition charges were highlighted. They're charged at the school district level. So in our case, that's most of the West Shore municipalities that are included in School District 62. And if you had to put us on a spectrum, our school district's school acquisition charges are brought in the middle of a spectrum when you compare it to other municipalities. So in summary, as I said, there were on the higher end of development fee application, but not necessarily inordinately so. We're still quite comparable on a lot of different types of applications. Development cost charges, we are in the lower end, as well as for building permit fees. It was found that Colwood was very much on the low end of the spectrum, with only Langford beating us out for the cost of a building permit for the comparable building that was used to look at the comparison. And once again, school acquisition charges were relative. We were in the middle of the pack. So with that, concludes my my attempt at doing justice to Jill's great report, and I will open up to questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ian. Councillor Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just first, I'll move the motion so we can get started. My question is this, and Ian may not have the answer, but can we explain what accounts for such a dynamic range from top to bottom for Langford? I'm looking specifically at table 1 there, and it's showing 2,300 to 12,000. In general terms, what can account for that spread, Ian?
Hi, Mr. Chair. Table 1, we're looking at the development application fees. I will hazard a guess here, but I believe that that relates to a different way that they levy the fee, such that it's tied to a location within the community. And I'm not sure if our Director of Development Services and Engineering, Brent Molnar, would like to add to that, but I know they have a fee structure that is more complex than ours in terms of the different areas that pay for different application fees.
It's just a little more difficult to sort of assess where we fit in. I'm not really that interested in sort of being the least expensive in town, but we should certainly be comparable and not over the top in most areas. And I'd love to know more if Brent knows anything, perhaps.
Sorry, while I get myself unmuted, through the chair to Councillor Jensen. If you'd like a detailed breakdown of those bits, we could certainly ask how the table was all put together. I was a review party too, so I can't add much more meat to it, but what we could do is ask the review team to look at a like for like so that you can understand what the assumptions are and they can understand how it translates across the board, whether that be a 10,000 square foot commercial to residential comparative. And I think that's what's missing here is the like for like comparative. If you'd like to see it, we can bring that forward.
I don't want to see any more work done on this because I got the gist. I was just interested to notice that there was such a dynamic range there. And I did see in her report here that I think they selected like a single family $500,000 premise as kind of the barometer, if I'm not mistaken. And it just seems to be pretty subjective there. And I'd love to know more about how Langford does that without having to sort of re-report on this. I'm happy to ask that of Jill when she comes back, or await an email response is just fine.
Okay. Thank you very much. Chair recognizes Councillor Parkinson.
Thank you, Chair. This is a good report. Quite like it. I think, of course, I think we all understand the DCCs and the comparables. What roads, specifically speaking of roads, what roads do we have to build? How many units do we think we're dividing the cost of? And what does that work out to? There's not a lot that can be done with it. The other aspects of this report basically refer to things that I believe are supposed to be done on a cost recovery basis. So things like building permit fees and development variance fees and all that kind of stuff. So my understanding would be that next year when we do the service review, somebody will be looking at that and coming back and saying, you know, no, these are the right fees. They covered our costs, you know, just right, or a little bit extra, whatever it might be. So we can understand that completely. Because it seems to me that it doesn't really matter if we find that our fees are way out of line, but they're covering our costs, then we have to dig a little deeper and find out why our costs are out of line than the others. So I think that's kind of what I'd be looking for in the service review next year. But what we have here today, I think, is a crackerjack start. Quite happy with it.
Thank you very much. Ian, did you have a rebuttal to that? I see your hand up right now.
No, Mr. Chair, thank you for allowing me to speak. It was actually a response to Councillor Jensen's question. I was able to pull up the fee schedule from Langford. Okay. So the City of Langford charges rezoning fees on a sliding scale based on the area of land that's under consideration. So the base fee starts quite low for a text amendment at $2,100 roughly. And that's, or sorry, for $1,053 for one text amendment. And then as you look at the different areas of land that are included in the sliding scale, the combined fee for public hearing and the base fee goes from $5,840 for less than 1,000 square meters of site area, all the way up to $12,265 for a site that was greater than 8,094 square meters, all the way up to 40,467 square meters.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councillor Day.
Thank you. I like the report, but I feel like we've actually asked the wrong question. I think we should be asking if we're achieving development without negatively impacting our existing taxpayers or overburdening our new residents. That's where our model comes from in the legislation, where we're recovering our costs. And what I'm concerned about that isn't looked at in this report is the cost to the city to ensure that what was approved is what we get. So I think that we need to also consider potentially our bylaw costs, for example, if it's through bylaw that we achieve compliance, or whoever else working for the city is being actioned as a result of the developments that are taking place. So just to make that really clear for you, in the past, when Royal Bay was approved back in '99, There were some stands of trees that were protected that were eventually cut down, and there was no consequence for that. And then more recently, there's another development in the same area proceeding in spite of concerns of the citizens. It proceeded based on, it's on Royal Bay Drive, it proceeded based on the existing zoning rather than the proposal that they did bring forward. And there's a number of environmental damages that I think are happening that I'm not aware of them being considered. So and it's one of the discussions that I've had over time with different staff members, just wanting to ensure that you know, we have processes in place to follow up and make sure that what we are trying to achieve is actually what happens there. So I think we have to look at ensuring compliance with our permits, as well as just whether or not, you know, our fees are the same as somebody else's, because our costs go up every time we have to take some further action to make sure that it is in compliance. So I'm just very concerned that we're not asking those kinds of questions. We've had a lot of feedback over the last several years from residents who are being negatively impacted by development. And I'm not seeing anything change for those people. I'm aware of several families that have moved away because of those issues of never-ending development and, you know, patio furniture covered in dust and debris. So I just want to ensure that we are considering the whole picture and not just how it works out for developers. We have to ask ourselves how it works out for our community. And we can't compare ourselves to other communities because they might not have a big mountain made out of rock that needs services drilled through it. So their costs might be very different than our costs. Our costs might be lower because we have easy to develop land, but we can't assume that we would be the same as any other community, because we have a unique community and we need to make sure that what we're doing is making it a better place. So I guess I'd like to ask anyone from administration if there are plans to consider the costs of compliance monitoring as well as the costs of permit revenue.
Chair recognizes our CAO, Robert Earl.
Thank you to Chair Kobayashi and through to Councillor Day. This particular report on today's agenda was in response to Council's strategic plan within the prosperity section, tactic number 6, which was to review and benchmark the municipal costs of development against comparable communities. Within the governance area, there's a further tactic, tactic number 8, which is scheduled for the 4th quarter of 2020, which is to review and recommend a financial model to understand the impact of new development on existing and future tax levels. And that report should provide guidance to committee and through to council with respect to whether or not developments are having a financial negative or positive impact on the existing community. Your final point, however, with respect to permit compliance, administration is not currently aware of any specific council direction to return with a particular report on that matter, and we would be happy to do so at council's direction.
Thank you very much. Councillor Baxter.
As I understand it, we haven't had in the past or the present any actual records of how much time staff spend on development permits, for instance, or rezonings, where we could calculate what actual cost needs to be recovered, not per item, but over the whole year. Is that correct?
Ian?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In response to Councillor Baxter's question, in 2016, we took we made the attempt to essentially estimate the number of hours that were attributable to the different types of applications that we get here in Colwood. The two things that drove costs primarily in terms of our research was the extent to which development applications have to go through an extended process because of council considerations or questions from the public that then prompted council to ask questions of staff and the developer. So it was difficult to really estimate the number of hours on, particularly for rezonings, but it was easier for things like development permits, and we provided an estimate of the hours taken for the different types of application at that time, and that report is available still and will be brought back in 2021 for the review that's council's asked to have taken place. In terms of tracking the time as we go through our payroll system, I know that myself and other staff have done that to basically ground truth our estimates. And as I said, it was really all over the map in terms of different applications requiring more or less time because of the different natures of the different projects. And I will say that our current fee schedule, there was an attempt to reflect the changes or the differences in person power that's required for each application, in that there is a prorating of different costs based on the scale of development that was put forward in that fee schedule, and that was adopted by council in 2016.
As I acknowledged in my question, it is not reasonable to record times for individual applications and expect that data to mean anything. And I take that response as me being correct, that we actually don't have any total numbers for any given year of time spent on development applications, and we've had to estimate. So my follow-up question is, are we planning to have those total numbers in future years? For instance, when you prepare the report or start looking at the new fees in 2021.
Okay, Brent Molnar, please.
Thank you very much. That's a great question that we're looking to work our way towards in regards to our land development program, where we can actually start to pick out times that are works that are associated directly with development permits, directly with rezoning applications. And we're tending to work towards further clarity on Councillor Baxter's request to be able to adequately deal with timing. Right now, presently, it's the engineering team which has got poor recording of how much time is spent on capital projects versus development applications, because it's all considered works within the road right of way. We presently are able to outline how much staff time has been contributed to works within the right of way, and 100% of development services time is to development applications and processes, and has been for the past 2020. But further works in terms of land development software will help provide further clarity for council as they wish in this regard.
Excellent, thank you for that. I look forward to having better data on that. From my own experience, and I'm sure from staff's, there are jurisdictions that are clearly not trying to recover costs. point to, for instance, Sydney collecting $300 for a form and character development permit. You can't process the paperwork for $300, given the the per hour cost of employing people, not what you pay them. So clearly, the low end numbers here, and a lot of them are not intended to recover costs, or if they are, they've certainly missed the mark by a long way. However, I'm fairly certain, and I think probably most of council would agree with me, that I don't think the public wants to be paying to subsidize our efforts to process development applications, but would rather that the developer pay the full cost of that. And in response to an implication earlier, the new residents do not pay that cost. The developer pays it. The new resident always pays whatever the market will bear for whatever property or service they are looking for in the private sector. Part of my reason for asking all that is that there's another time issue here. The development permit applications, the development application fees are a very small part of what we cost the developer. The larger part of what we cost the developer is how long we take to process their applications. Time is money to developers in a really big way. And paying $3,400 for a rezoning fee is a pittance if it takes months and months and months to process. And I know it's difficult to sort out what is our time and what is time we spend waiting for the developer. But I would hope that one day, and I think this is going to be tough to do, but it would be good if we could figure out how well we're competing on time to process compared to some of the other municipalities. And if we could, if we're doing well, we could talk about that publicly so that the developers know. And if you'll just excuse me a second, I've got some more questions here. No, I can't find my notes, so I'll leave that where it is for now. And I'll bring that up in another meeting. Thank you.
Okay, I'd just like to recognize Brent in response, please.
Thank you very much, through the chair, to members of council and specifically Councillor Baxter. In November of this year, we intend to look at service provided by the city. And one of the factors for development is exactly what Councillor Baxter has outlined. What's in our control and what's not. Typically, processing time is considered from the time of application to the time of either issuance or consideration of matter of committee or council. That's the processing time that we're looking to bring forward. It will include both development permits, rezoning applications, and subdivision. However, is not intended to get into the process thereafter. Just initial deliverance with council, or is considered as outputted by staff in regards to subdivision and DPs. Hope that provides clarity.
Thank you. Thank you, Brent. Chair recognizes Councillor Logan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do echo my colleagues' comments about the report. It was very helpful. What would be helpful for me too is when we sorry, the system muted me. What would be helpful is, I think, lost my train of thought there. When we do look at updating our development cost charges, that we look at a per lot charge comparable with other communities, recognizing that some other communities may have additional development cost charges levied. I'm thinking like a Parks DCC and other types of DCCs. Just if we're looking at wanting to remain competitive, and I think Michael hit the nail right on the head in terms of time is money. And the comment that I've had from developers is that they don't mind paying the higher development cost charges or some of the fees if they had a reasonable assurance that their application would be turned around in a very timely manner, because that saves them on the carrying charges. So, you know, it's a bit of a win-win for both applicant and the city. So I'm glad, thank you, Brent, that we're looking at that. And I know Rome wasn't built in a day, and there's a lot of changes that have been made already. So I am looking forward to talking about some of the efficiencies that can be brought about in tandem with any increase. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Logan. I, at this point in time, would like to call the question to the motion to receive the report. And if I could have a show of hands for all those that oppose. Seeing none, the motion is passed. And finally, last item under new business 7.3, understanding household prosperity in Colwood. And if I could ask Sandra Russell, our communications manager, to speak on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Kobayashi. And thank you for this opportunity to give a brief verbal update on the Household Prosperity Report. It's one of the prosperity tactics in the strategic plan. So just an understanding, household prosperity considers economic factors such as income, housing, and education, but also the social, cultural, and environmental aspects that contribute to well-being and quality of life. It could be argued that if all households in Colwood are prosperous, then Colwood as a whole is prosperous. So it's an important factor for the city to understand in order to make informed decisions that focus on creating a thriving community with housing choices, employment opportunities, transportation options, recreation, cultural, and social connections, and those things that Colwood residents agree will give a high quality of life. So establishing Colwood-specific quantitative baseline data about household prosperity will support the city's economic recovery efforts and more broadly guide strategic decision-making and service planning. The kind of data we'll look at will include indicators like up-to-date demographics and 2018 household incomes. As you know, often we get old census data. This is going to use newer, more current data, as well as social, health, behavioral, and media variables that will provide real insight into how residents spend their time, their leisure activities, their environmental habits, and their approaches to community life. So a really round picture of this. The data will also be presented by postal code so that we can explore how different neighborhoods or different genders or other identity factors experience prosperity in Colwood and can gear decisions toward those factors. The analysis will identify gaps and opportunities that the city may wish to focus on, and these will then be tested from a household perspective through a qualitative community needs assessment. So basically a survey of residents and other analysis. So the quantitative household prosperity report that we're talking about right now will be updated every 4 years and then tested against this qualitative community needs assessment every 2 years, twice in between, to ensure it reflects the current reality for Colwood residents. And 2 separate experienced firms would be engaged to undertake each of these tasks because the skill sets are really quite different and distinct, and both that quantitative and qualitative perspective are really important to understand. So just a quick overview of the report, the steps that will be taken to produce the report. Step 1, identifying themes and indicators. Step 2, collecting the data and doing the analysis. Step 3, summarizing and communicating the results with compelling infographics that highlight key aspects of household prosperity in Colwood. And then step 4, reporting back to the community. So creating a draft report for review by the community and council. And that should happen by December, the end of December 2020. So that's just a brief and quick overview of what is planned. The recommendation here is simply that the Economic Prosperity Committee receive this update on the status of the Household Prosperity Report, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, I'd like to just get a motion before we start discussion on this. A mover to receive this report. Councillor Day, thank you very much. And Councillor Day, you were the first to put up your hand, so I'll let you speak.
Thank you. I'd like to know what legislation we'll be working under when we have this information.
That's an excellent question. I'm not sure I understand it. You mean in terms of freedom of information and privacy legislation? Is that-
That's right.
So I'd have to ask Selena, our corporate officer, for exact legislation, but certainly those rules will be followed. And personal information will not be presented in any way, nor will it be collected. These data sets are things like from Statistics Canada, existing data sets that will be collated together to provide this information.
Okay. It's just, I guess what bothers, I understand the reasoning behind our desire to understand our community, but it's not something that municipalities typically do. We don't collect social insurance numbers. We don't consider financial positions when we're taxing. So I'm just a little concerned about how we hold this data, how it will be verified, and what protections are in place. So my next question is really about in your report, it says the postal code is being used as a means of identity. But those of us who's been through a few elections know that our postal codes do not coincide with our electoral boundaries. So I'm just concerned that we know that this data is correct for our neighborhoods.
So I can tell you that one source of the data Director Borhill referred to just recently that we are arranging to work with has that all figured out for us. And any of those variables will be reported and explained clearly as they come up. That's the best I can say at this point.
Okay.
Mr. Earl, you would like to add something to that?
Thank you, Chair Kobayashi, and through to Councillor Day. The reason that postal code level data aggregation exists is such that the personal information cannot be connected. And so we can't get more granular than postal code in an effort to protect exactly what you're describing, the personal information of a particular property or a particular street. If the data, even within a postal code, if there are not enough responders, then the data is aggregated to the next postal code level. And so the protection of the privacy of personal information will run throughout this project.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And my last thing that I just want to leave in your thoughts is that I really think our concern should be about whether or not we're providing the needed services. And I know that that is what we're trying to get at with this report, but I don't think that should be tempered by how much taxpayers can afford to pay. So I don't think we should be asking that question, how much can our citizens afford to pay? I think we should be asking, you know, what would make them want to take transit instead of driving their car, for example, because roads are one of the most expensive things we do. So I'm feeling a little uncomfortable with delving into this because I think it should be perhaps in partnership with the province or the federal government because it's very far out of our jurisdiction. Thank you.
Councillor Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for the presentation, Sandra. A couple of thoughts come to mind. Is this going to be a point in time kind of survey or aggregate over a certain period of time? My concern is if we're looking at today, would there be a dramatic difference from pre-COVID circumstances as opposed to being measured as it is today? Maybe you can speak on what impact that might have on this.
It will be a point in time, and it will be based on what data is available. Likely that won't be today's data. For example, I think the most recent income data that we'll have access to is 2018. So it'll be sort of a collection of data, the best we can get, as current as we can get. I also don't think it will be a problem to understand today, despite the fact that it's out of the ordinary. This is what people are living through now. And to Councillor Day's point, I think that this is information we need, and it's more than the income and the dollar amounts. It's about what services people are missing and what they feel they would need to enjoy, a happy life and thrive here in Colwood. So I don't know if that answered your question, but.
Thanks. That's good for me. And yet, if we look at it the other way around, if we're grabbing data from 2018, how relevant is it today too? And I'm sure we'll have to extrapolate some of that and maybe make some inferences. But I'm interested to see the results. And I was reading this with the view that I wonder how relevant this is for us at this level. But I do think there certainly is a place for this, and gaining a better understanding for all of us of what's going on in our community might help us take better decisions. Thanks.
Councillor Baxter. Unmute, Michael.
Sorry, yeah. Just help me better understand what we will be getting here. What I've got so far from the report and the discussion is that we will be looking at actual financial prosperity of the community, but also at I might call experiential prosperity. Do people feel comfortable where they are? Are they stressed by their situation? That sort of thing. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct, Councillor Baxter. So, and between the two things, between the household prosperity data, the quantitative data, and then the community needs assessment, that's the piece that will really round out the pieces, that the data identifies as gaps or opportunities, where we identify from the data that there's something missing that we may need to do something about. Those are the pieces we'll take to the community and say, does this ring true for you? Are these things that matter to you? What is it that you need to thrive?
Thank you. And I think it's that latter experiential prosperity, if you like, that we can do something about. And because we, provide recreational opportunities and provide information to help people access those. So I think this will be quite relevant to the job we're doing and the job we're supposed to be doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I just have a quick comment to you, Sandra. I guess my question is, when do we know, like, you've got a very difficult task trying to measure this, and if you can get that magic solution, you're going to be the most sought after person, that's for sure. But I guess, I did notice that you did say in the beginning, like, one of the things that you look at is education. So when do we, I guess my concern is, because, for example, I just read the recently published Fraser Institute report, and it was not very kind to our two high schools, Belmont or Royal Bay. In fact, we were in the lowest quadrant as far as the ranking goes, and it's pretty quantitative on how they do it. It's based on hard numbers. Some of it is qualitative, but it is the ranking that is used throughout Canada. And but I was very concerned looking at, you know, but I'm not there, I don't think, to tell the school board how to do its job, but I guess it's these lines that we're crossing. You know, this isn't well published or anything, but how are we going to get around those type of issues? To me, I'm just asking the question.
So this will be more of a report of residents' level of education, not so much a judgment of education services in Colwood at this point.
Gotcha.
So it's about understanding a baseline of who Colwood residents are, and then testing that through a needs assessment to understand what services they would like to see.
Okay, thank you very much, Sandra. That clarifies it, because I certainly don't want to go down that street, that's for sure.
Mhm.
Seeing no other comments, we'll ask the question. If I could see a show of hands for all that oppose the receipt of the report. And we're all good. So that passes. So our next meeting of the Economic Prosperity Committee is scheduled to be held on Monday, October 26th. And at this point in time, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn, and Councillor Logan, of course. And thank you very much, and we'll see everyone at 5 tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.